Hello, welcome to my first devlog for my new game that I started working on a little while ago, Portal Pirates. Now, here's the deal about the name. I'm not entirely sure about it yet. What I'm trying to say is that I like it, but I'm not sure if the portals are going to be the main part of the game. Anyway, the way this came to be is that I decided I wanted to make a Unity game. Since I've always wanted to make a fun, two-dimensional puzzle game and a 2D platformer, I decided I would make a 2D puzzle platformer inspired by Portal 1 and 2. I'm not sure about how the levels will be designed, but I want to make puzzles similar to the Portal puzzles. Puzzles that start out intuitive, but really start to make the player think. So, with those things in mind, I got to working on the game. The first thing I thought to do was to get the basic platformer controls/physics done. To do this, I have a script inside an empty game object named player. In that script I first get the player's movement inputs and then I change the player's velocity based on that. For the jumping I had to make a ground check which doesn't quite work all the time. Sometimes you're able to wall jump, so maybe I'll make that a feature for secrets or something. Another thing I had to do was make a custom physics material that I could put onto the player's rigid body so I could disable friction, as otherwise the player would stick to walls. To counter the constant sliding I had to make my own friction. In reality, all I did was accelerate the player when they started moving and decelerate them when they stopped moving. With all that out of the way, I had a basic platformer movement system that felt natural to me. After that, I noticed that the player being a white square looked really boring, so I made up some player animations and put them onto a sprite sheet. Animating an object is really easy in Unity, so I set up the animations in no time. I also added the portal gun to the player. It just hovers in the direction of the mouse because I'm too lazy to make arms that reach out to it. Currently, the gun has no functionality, but I'll add that later. Alright, so now that all the animations are set up, I want to get to the camera. Currently, the camera just stays still and makes the game feel quite limited. To change that, I decided to smoothly move the camera toward the player. This means if the player is going fast enough, it won't be visible to the camera. I may need to change that. The movement system didn't feel entirely complete to me, however, which has led me to drawing up a new slide animation for the player. I hooked the animation up, made the hitbox a bit smaller while sliding, and now when the player presses the left shift key, it will slide. The friction also gets decreased by a lot, which allows the player to pick up a massive amount of speed when sliding down a ramp. When going really fast, I decided I wanted a trail behind the player to spice it up a bit. I did this by using Pythagoras' theorem to check the total velocity of the player. If the total velocity is above 20, a trail will appear. I made the trail by cloning the player's current sprite, turning it black, and fading it into the background. After this, I would delete it to save some performance. Now we're on to the portals. Let's get into how they work. So, first of all, I have to detect when the player is pressing left click and right click. Then, on the frame that the player clicks, I fire a portal pellet out of the gun. That portal pellet is given an initial velocity and keeps travelling until it hits an object. Once it hits an object, it checks for the tag portalable. If the object doesn't have the tag, it stops the particles from emitting and deletes the portal pellet after a few seconds. If the portal pellet hits a portalable surface, it will remove the rigid body and switch the collider to a trigger so that the player's hitbox doesn't collide with the pellet. When the collider is triggered, it checks if the other portal exists. If the other portal does exist, it checks if the other collider is the player or another physics-affected object. If it is, it creates a singular trail object in the same position as the object. It will then set the position of the object to the other portal. Now we're getting on to the fun part. If the object has a velocity, the velocity will be translated into the other portal's direction. This means if you fall into one portal and the other portal is on a wall, it will shoot you horizontally with the same velocity you had when you were falling into the first portal. The velocity took me at least 3 hours to fully add in, as I couldn't figure out an easy way to translate the velocity. Instead, I had to manually hard-code it, which means the portals don't change velocity based on orientation. If any of you have any better suggestions for how I can do this, please let me know. I want to be able to shoot an object diagonally by falling or running into a portal. That would be so much fun. Also, if the player is holding onto an object, such as a cube, that object will also be teleported to the other portal, with its own trail too! Although, since I'm editing the velocity of it every frame while the player is grabbing it, its velocity doesn't change at all. But don't worry, it will still follow the player. Now, on to more of the solving features. I added a pressure plate which works like in Portal, where if any physics affected object is on top of it, it will be activated. This includes the player. I also made a cube switch, which I like to think of more like in the game Patrick's Parabox, where there is an outline of the cube. If the cube is inside of the outline, it will activate and turn yellow. The player cannot activate it on their own, only cubes. Finally, I made a pressable button where if the player hovers their mouse on it and presses E, the button will press down and activate. Now we're getting to the last feature of the devlog. After I made the activators, I noticed how boring the game actually looked. Since I had to convert the game to the Unity Universal Render Pipeline to use shader graphs, I was able to use the cool 2D lighting features. This means I could take light sources that casting real-time shadows on top of objects. They had so many options that I could configure, which means it took a few hours to make look right. First of all, I added a light to the player and made the entire scene very dark. Then I added shadows. The shadows took a while to get working as they kept overlapping other shadow casting objects that were next to them. After I got the shadows sorted out, I added a light source to the portals in order to make them stand out. I think that turned out really good, and so I moved on to the cube. I added a light source similar to the players to the cube. I can't tell if it's too bright, so I'd appreciate it if you gave me some feedback on that. I also added some light sources to the activators to make them stand out. Red for the pressure plates, white for the cube switches, when activated they turn yellow, and also white for the buttons too. Now, that concludes about everything I've done in Unity. All of these features took me over a week to make, which really astounds me. I didn't think all of this would take so long. I'm still very proud of what I've done so far though. Throughout my 3.5-year game development journey, I have had many drops in motivation and dropped many projects because of this. I'm already starting to feel like that with this project, but I'm going to try to power through it. Maybe once I find a proper way out to make levels and add a narration system, I might feel more motivated to work on the project. Also, since I'm new to making YouTube videos, I may take a long time to make them. This one has taken a very long time to make. It was quite interesting making this, and I don't think this will be the last thing I do on YouTube. If school doesn't get in the way, I may have another one out within the next month. Anyway, that's everything I've wanted to talk about in this video. If you enjoyed, please give me some feedback, whether that is on the editing, the script, or the game itself. I'd greatly appreciate anything I receive. If this video gets some good feedback, I may feel more motivated to make another one and work on this game. I hope to be speaking here again some other day. Bye.